been a few fun weeks of driving around Eish, my recently purchased 1996 Toyota Rav4, and I've had no major issues other than a small oil leak. Don't judge, nobody's perfect, and I suspect it's coming from the oil pump, so I'm going to replace these two oil pump seals and see if that resolves the issue. To begin, let's have a look at the oil leak. The car is parked on a flat surface, the handbrake is up and it's in gear. The oil pump is located near the front right hand corner of the Rav4, behind the splash guard cover and just above the oil pan. Remove the bolts and washers holding the splash guard in place with a 10mm socket. Once the splash guard is off, it is obvious that Eish is indeed leaking and the oil leak is originating from the oil pump. The vehicle needs to be in neutral so that we can turn the engine over later. I'm putting bricks behind and in front of the rear tires as an added precaution. As a disclaimer, I'm going to state, don't do anything that I do. With that said, let's get loose with those lug nuts and jack up the right front wheel. I've placed a precautionary log underneath the vehicle, and that is the jack point for the front right wheel. With the splash guard and wheel off, we are now ready to operate on Eish. Well, that's actually not quite true. There is another important preparation step. I've placed a jack stand underneath the oil pan to help support the engine in anticipation of one of the engine mounts coming off later. You will need to lower the vehicle slightly to make sure the jack stand is firmly in place. Okay, after that false start, now we are actually ready. Let's get things going. We're going to be adjusting the alternator, so disconnect the negative terminal of the battery first. Use a 14mm socket to loosen the pivot bolt on the alternator and a 12mm socket to loosen the other two adjusting bolts. The purpose of this is not to remove the alternator, it is simply to loosen the alternator's drive belt. Once it's loose enough, that can pop down, this can pop off, and I'll just let it drop down there. Now we need to remove a few things in order to access the upper timing belt cover. I'm going to take the route of least resistance here and only remove what's necessary. Starting with the engine mount's insulator. Use a 14mm socket and a long T-bar to tackle these bolts and nuts. Ideally, you'd use a deep 14mm socket to get the two nuts off. I got by with a regular socket and a little bit of creativity. There is a second nut underneath the engine mount, don't forget it. The engine is being propped up under the oil pan so you can safely remove the engine mount insulator. Remember to keep track of all the bits and pieces, you don't want to lose your nuts. This next bit is interesting. The harmonic balancer needs to come off to access the lower timing bolt cover. But the harmonic balancer is attached to the crankshaft with a tight press fit and a secure central bolt. There are many ways to remove the central bolt, and one way is a lot easier than the others. The central bolt requires a 19mm socket, and I'm going to attach that to a sliding T-bar. The crankshaft and harmonic balancer turn in a clockwise direction as the engine turns over. So, instead of trying to keep the crankshaft still while you unthread the bolt in an anti-clockwise direction, you can keep the bolt still and allow the crankshaft to turn in a clockwise direction around it. Reconnect the battery, and with the car still in neutral, touch the ignition on and off. As easy as that, the bolt is now loose. Now put the car in 5th gear, disconnect the battery, and prevent the wheel hub from turning anti-clockwise with an iron rod or ancient tool of some sort. Once loose, the bolt holding on the harmonic balancer will come off easily with any 19mm socket of your choice. To remove the harmonic balancer, I'm using a flange type puller. Some people call it a duck foot puller for obvious reasons. And the kit came with a variety of bolts. 2 of them fitted snugly into the harmonic balancer, and then I could rotate the central screw with a 19mm socket. The tip of the central screw pushes against the crankshaft and pulls the harmonic balancer off. The smaller bolt conveniently stops the harmonic balancer from crashing to the floor when it comes off. Once off, you can tuck the bolts away. This is a shongololo. It belongs back in the garden. There are 5 bolts holding the upper timing belt cover in place. The first is underneath the timing belt cover. This bolt right underneath the alternator is a longer bolt threading through both timing belt covers. There is another short bolt underneath the alternator. One next to the alternator. And the last one up here. With those 5 bolts out, the upper timing belt cover can be gently removed upwards. With a bit of wiggling, the top of the timing belt cover does come out. I just had to unclip this ground wire here. Once the upper timing belt cover is off, the lower timing belt cover can be removed by unthreading 4 bolts. Keep track of all of your bolts because some are longer than others. You can pop off the cover and pull it downwards. The bottom half of the timing belt cover needed a good clean. It was full of oil and gunk, and I've put the bolts back in their places so I don't forget where they go. Alright, I've cleaned this up a little. There's so much oil and gunk built up there. This can come off. Goes behind the harmonic balancer. That is the long and short of it. Keep track of all your bolts for both timing belt covers. The timing belt can now be taken off by loosening the tensioner pulley. Use a 14mm socket to loosen the tensioner bolt. Then I used a larger wrench and pushed down on the hook on the bottom of the tensioner spring to relieve the tensioner's tension. At the same time, I retightened the bolt to keep the timing belt loose. Once the timing belt is loose, it comes off easily. The belt is still in excellent condition and can be reused later. The idler pulley is in the way and needs to come off next. The bolt is loosened with a 14mm socket. There are 7 10mm bolts holding on the cover of the oil pump body. This is the only part of the oil pump that will need to be removed to get to those faulty seals. Okay, this oil pump looks worse than a dog's breakfast. The outer O-ring seal has become brittle and broken into pieces, and all the oil and sludge inside needs to be mopped up. This is the order of the bolt pattern. These 2 are shorter. You will need a 12mm socket to take off the nut holding the oil pump pulley in place. You will also need to hold the drive rotor behind the pulley steady. You can use a cloth and a lockable plier wrench to do this. Put the pulley aside, slide the drive rotor out, and then you can pop the old oil pump oil seal out. It is time to seal the deal. You're going to need some good quality RTV silicone for 2 reasons. Firstly, to hold this awkwardly shaped supposed O-ring gasket in place. And secondly, I'll show you later, to seal the actual cover. This flimsy seal is the reason that this is a common oil leak on the first generation Rav4s. Once you have the seal in place, we can move on to the smaller but sturdier oil pump seal. The oil pump seal can be pushed or tapped in the same orientation as the old one was until it is flush with the cover. But before it goes in, You can add a little bit of engine oil, the same oil you put in the Rav4, to the inside of the seal. Now you can flip the cover over and add a thin layer of RTV silicone to the outer contact surface. Moving back to the driven rotor, I'm going to flip it around because there's a mark here that should be facing the same way as the mark on the drive rotor. It all looks symmetrical to me, but I'm going to do it. This is also a good time to add some oil to the driven rotor and the drive rotor before they get sealed up and start spinning. The oil pump pulley goes back on and the pulley nut is tightened to 28 Newton meters. Install the oil pump cover with its 7 bolts and uniformly tighten the bolts in several passes. You're aiming for 8.8 Newton meters of torque for each of these small bolts. And then the RTV silicone is going to take 24 hours to cure fully. So after we put the idler pulley back on, we're going to take a 24-hour break. The new seals are in place and we're going to let the RTV silicone do its magic over the next 24 hours. The last thing I'm going to do today is tighten down the idler pulley bolt to 42 Newton meters. We are back the next day. This process takes a while, we can't rush it. Before we continue, it's a good idea to prime the oil pump by spinning it clockwise with the drill. It is now time for the timing belt timing. The crankshaft will need to be turned clockwise by hand, so we will insert the central bolt again. Turn the engine by hand until this notch here lines up perfectly with this bump. This indicates that the piston in the number 1 cylinder of the engine is at its highest point on the compression stroke. The engine is now at top dead center, and to align the camshaft correctly, you rotate the camshaft pulley clockwise until it reaches a certain mark. For this next part, you need a compact mirror to do your makeup and to align your camshaft. Use the mirror to see if your camshaft pulley has been rotated to the correct position. This mark needs to be inside this tiny hole. It's tiny because it needs to be precise. Once the camshaft pulley is perfectly aligned, another small circular mark will become visible on the side. Don't let this throw you off. This serves no purpose here, and you have done an excellent job. Everything is aligned with top dead center, so we can put the timing belt back in place. It should slip on quite easily because remember we pushed down the tensioner spring and tightened the pulley bolt earlier. Now it's time to let go. You'll never find peace holding on to that tension. You can now put the Rav in 5th gear and rotate the engine by hand 2 full revolutions. Remember to realign the crankshaft with top dead center. Perfect. Check to see that the camshaft pulley is also aligned, which it is. If it isn't, sorry for you, you'll have to take a few steps back and try putting in the timing belt again. Now remember the Rav is in 5th gear, so we can stop the wheel hub from turning anti-clockwise to stop the engine from turning anti-clockwise so that we can unthread the central bolt on the crankshaft. To stop the wheel hub from turning, use a steel rod or an ancient tool of some sort. There are no special tricks required to unthread the bolt this time. Slide the timing belt guide back on with the cup side facing outwards. Then reinstall the lower timing belt cover. Now, this is why we kept track of where the long and short bolts go. Tighten down 4 of the bolts to 7.8 Newton meters and leave the long bolt on the far upper right out because it's also going to thread through the upper timing bolt cover. Regain your balance by pressing the harmonic balancer back on and threading the central bolt in. Now let's prevent the wheel hub from turning clockwise so that we can tighten down the harmonic balancer with the central bolt that attaches to the crankshaft. Use a torque wrench to ensure this is fastened to 108 Newton meters. This can be moved away now. The next step is to move the crankshaft back to the top dead center position. This is still possible with the lower timing belt cover on because the lower timing belt cover is conveniently marked. Rotate the crankshaft clockwise once again until the notch on the harmonic balancer lines up with the 0 on the lower timing belt cover. Check that the camshaft pulley is lined up once again, and this time it isn't. But never fear, there is a simple solution. By pushing down on the bottom of the tensioner spring with a wrench, you can relieve some of the tension on the belt and then skip the belt over the pulley's teeth and move the pulley ever so slightly. Once you're happy with the pulley's alignment, rotate the crankshaft clockwise 2 full revolutions back to top dead center, recheck both marks, and then you're good to go. The small drive bolt that connects to the harmonic balancer and the power steering pump pulley can go on next. There are 2 bolts that require a 14mm socket to adjust the tension with the power steering pump pulley. Rotate the crankshaft again clockwise, but this time to 1 7/8 rotation until you reach 45 degrees before top dead center. This is indicated by a different mark. With the notch on the harmonic balancer lined up with that mark, we can now tighten down the tensioner pulley bolt to 31 Newton meters with a 14mm socket. The upper timing bolt cover can now be maneuvered back into place. Line up the bolts, 3 long bolts, 2 short bolts, all tightened to 7.8 Newton meters, which is not very tight, and if you do over tighten them, you could crack the plastic. The last long bolt goes back in. Put the power steering fluid reservoir back in place, and remember to reconnect the ground wire that we disconnected. We are now on the home straight. The engine mount insulator gets bolted back in with 4 bolts and 2 nuts. The smaller bolt requires 37 Newton meters of force and the larger 52 Newton meters, as well as the 2 nuts. Don't forget there's a nut underneath the engine mount. All of these nuts and bolts require a 14mm socket, and I used a long T-bar to tighten them. Next up, we can put the drive belt back in place for the AC compressor and the alternator. A 12mm socket can be used to tighten the belt with the adjusting bolt on the alternator. If you don't tighten the bolt enough, it will squeak, but there should be a little bit of slack. Once it's tight enough, tighten the pivot bolt with a 14mm socket and the lock bolt with a 12mm socket. You can always adjust it again later. Soon, Eish will be roaring back to life, but we first have to reconnect the battery. Closing time, put the splash guard cover back on, jack up the RAV enough so that you can remove the jack stand. The engine mount is reconnected so it no longer needs the extra support. Get your wheel and lug nuts back on, then remember to log out. Take all the pressure off your jack and tighten your lug nuts to 103 Newton meters. With the car in gear, we are raring to go. We just need to remove the bricks. This fix certainly took a while, but it is incredibly satisfying to have no oil leaking out of Eish.